Imagine you live in, like, the most luxurious state-of-the-art smart home in the entire neighborhood.
Oh, right, with all the high-end upgrades.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
got absolutely everything. I mean, we're talking imported marble floors, climate control in literally every single room,
Mm.
a pantry that is just packed with exotic foods shipped in from across the globe.
Sounds pretty perfect.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But there is a massive catch to all of this.
Well, the foundation of that luxury is it's entirely out of your control.
Exactly. The catch is the house is made entirely of glass. You don't actually hold the master keys to your own front door. Your neighbor does.
Right.
Someone else handles your security system entirely. And your whole food supply, like all of it, relies on a single delivery app driver who has to pass through a very narrow, very dangerous alleyway every single day just to bring you dinner.
And that, it creates this really dangerous illusion. You feel secure because you are just surrounded by immense wealth, but structurally, you are completely exposed to the elements. The moment the neighborhood gets rough, that glass house is the very first thing to shatter.
And welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today is Saturday, May 30th, 2026. And for you, our listener, we have a very specific mission today.
We really do.
If you've been watching the news at all, you know the geopolitical landscape has just been completely upended. So we are diving into a highly urgent academic paper by Mohammed Bouhedji. It's titled GCC Self-Sufficiency Necessity Lessons Learned from the U.S.-Israeli-Iran War.
Yeah, it's a vital piece of research for understanding the current moment we're in.
It really is.
Bouhedji provides this really thorough structural breakdown of how the 2026 conflict essentially shattered the traditional survival strategy of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC.
Now, before we get into the mechanics of all this, and there are a lot of mechanics, we need to set the scene impartially. This paper and our deep dive today is looking objectively at the fallout from the recent 2026 U.S.-Israeli-Iran war.
Right, just the facts on the ground.
Exactly. We are absolutely not taking sides here. We are endorsing the viewpoints or the actions of any nation involved. Our goal for you is simply to explore the factual, economic, and structural realities that are detailed in this research.
Yeah, we're focusing purely on the mechanics of the fallout, not the politics. And the economic mechanics are, frankly, they're staggering.
Totally.
The paper outlines the immediate toll this conflict took on the Arab region. In just the first 30 days of hostilities, just 1 month, the Arab region experienced an estimated economic loss of $186 billion.
Wait, I just want to pause on that. 1 month.
1 month.
$186 billion just vanished. That is a scale of loss that's, honestly, it's hard to even visualize.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, that translates to a 6% contraction in regional GDP right out of the gate.
Wow.
And to put that in human terms, the conflict wiped out 3.7 million regional jobs and pushed 4 million people into poverty almost overnight.
4 million people.
Yeah, it's massive. And the region's airspace effectively closed, which canceled over 50,000 flights. War risk maritime insurance spiked to 10%, essentially freezing all shipping.
Right, because nobody can afford to move goods at that premium.
Exactly. And capital flight in that first month alone exceeded $100 billion. People just pulling their money out.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because an economic shock that massive and that rapid, it doesn't just happen because of bad luck or, like, being in the wrong neighborhood. A collapse of that magnitude means something inside the system was already fundamentally fragile.
Yeah, you're touching on the central thesis of the paper right there. The pre-2026 GCC model was built on what the author defines as a dependency trap.
A dependency trap.
Right. For decades, the Gulf states essentially mistook their immense hydrocarbon wealth for actual structural security.
Ah, they thought money equals safety.
Exactly. They purchased a highly complex system of external dependencies that operated beautifully during peacetime, but it lacked any real resilience against a geopolitical shock.
It's the glass house. So let's talk about the specific cracks in that glass. Bouhedji breaks this vulnerability down into 4 specific traps, right? And the first one really flips conventional wisdom on its head.
It does, yeah. The security trap.
Right, the security trap. Because historically, the GCC relied heavily on the United States for a military umbrella. I mean, they hosted massive U.S. military bases across their territories in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE.
All over the region.
Yeah, the assumption was always, well, we have a superpower parked on our lawn. Nobody's going to touch us.
And that was the foundational logic of their entire security architecture. But the 2026 conflict proved that this presence wasn't a shield, it was actually a bullseye.
Wow.
Adversaries justified their strikes on GCC civilian and energy infrastructure by explicitly citing the presence of those foreign military assets.
Because the superpowers have their own agendas, right? Containing adversaries, projecting global power. Those are superpower interests. But the GCC's primary interest is just regional stability.
Right, they just want to do business.
Exactly. So when the superpower goes to war, the host nation just gets dragged in. The very thing that was supposed to keep them safe made them legitimate targets in a broader war they were actively trying to stay neutral in.
That divergence of interests is fatal in a crisis. When push came to shove, the external alliances offered vulnerability rather than protection.
Yeah.
And when those military bases attract conflict, it immediately threatens the next foundational layer of society, which is just basic survival. And that brings us to the import trap.
Okay, and this one is terrifying for the average citizen. We're talking about food and water.
Yeah, the GCC region historically imported 80 to 90% of its food calories.
80 to 90%. That is wild.
It's huge, but the geographic bottleneck is the real nightmare here. Up to 90% of those calories historically transited through a single maritime choke point.
Let me guess, the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz.
So if someone decides to, I don't know, drop mines in that narrow alleyway or just threatens ships passing through, the delivery driver can't get to the glass house and the pantry empties out.
Very quickly. And the vulnerability extends to water, too. Up to 90% of their fresh water comes from desalination.
Which takes a lot of energy.
A ton of energy. And these aren't small distributed facilities. They are massive, highly concentrated mega plants sitting right on the coast. They are textbook mega targets.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, if a strike takes a major desalination plant offline, the desert environment becomes fundamentally uninhabitable in a matter of days.
It's chilling, honestly. So you have foreign bases drawing fire, your food and water lines are totally exposed. How are they paying for all this in the first place? I mean, that leads right into the economic trap.
Right, the third trap. The region's sovereign wealth, despite, decades of these ambitious diversification plans, it remained deeply tethered to a single commodity. Oil still accounted for 40 to 80% of government revenues.
Still that high, even recently.
Even recently. And crucial to this trap, that wealth was tied to the petrodollar system.
Meaning they sell oil, they get paid in U.S. dollars, and those dollars are held in Western financial systems.
Yes, exactly. Which leaves them incredibly vulnerable to global supply shocks and, frankly, weaponized financial clearing systems.
Right.
When the 2026 conflict removed millions of barrels from global supply, it didn't just cause a headache for importing nations in Europe or Asia. It fundamentally disrupted the GCC's own fiscal budgets. They couldn't seamlessly access or maneuver their own wealth.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the final vulnerability, which is so unique to their specific societal structure. The paper calls it the rentier trap.
The rentier trap, yeah.
I've also heard it called the labor trap. What actually makes a state a rentier state? I think that's a new term for a lot of people.
Yeah, so a rentier state is basically one that derives all or most of its national revenues from the rent of indigenous resources to external clients. So in this case, pulling oil out of the ground and selling it to the world.
Okay.
Because the government doesn't need to tax its citizens to generate revenue, it essentially buys social peace. The social contract becomes built on passive entitlements.
Like what?
State-provided benefits, heavily subsidized housing, secure, high-paying public sector jobs.
So the citizens are essentially getting a dividend for just existing in the country, rather than needing to drive a highly competitive, innovative domestic economy.
That's the structural flaw right there. It creates a massive reliance on expatriate labor to keep the actual gears of the economy turning. We're talking engineering, medicine, logistics, construction.
Wow.
In the UAE, for example, citizens make up as little as 11% of the population.
11%. So the lights are on. But nobody home actually knows how the wiring works.
Yeah.
If a war breaks out and the expats get on planes to flee, the entire country just freezes.
And what's fascinating here is that modern adversaries understand this asymmetric vulnerability perfectly.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. They don't need to defeat a Gulf state's military. They just need to spook the expatriate workforce and disrupt the fragile infrastructure.
Yeah.
And the economics of defending against this are just devastatingly lopsided.
How so? Walk me through the math of that, because that sounds really important.
Okay, think about the mechanics of modern air defense. An adversary launches a swarm of basic low-tech drones. They use commercial off-the-shelf parts, maybe costing a few $1,000s each.
Cheap stuff.
Very cheap. But to shoot them down, the defending nation is forced to fire advanced interceptor missiles that cost $1 million apiece.
Oh my God.
Yeah, relying on complex guidance systems and rare materials.
Oh, wow. So you might successfully defend your airspace, like your cities might be safe that night,
Here.
but you are bleeding your domestic capital